Welcome back to our summary series of Start With No by Jim Camp. This book has already sold over 1 million copies and changed the way business is done. If you're new here, welcome. We read the big ideas so you can win more deals, build a bigger business, and never settle for second best. All right, let's dive into Lesson 1. Win-win will kill your deal. Jim Camp wastes no time in making a bold statement. Win-win is the worst thing that's ever happened to negotiation. And he makes that argument in a very compelling way. Because if you're like most people, you've been trained to believe that compromise is noble, at first, because you fear losing the deal more than you value honest decision-making. It sounds good. That doesn't mean saying no just to be difficult. It means creating an environment where no is safe. You don't chase the yes. You don't force agreement. Instead, you ask questions. You uncover truth. You help the other party feel in control. Because when people feel safe saying no, they become open to real conversation. And that's when decisions happen, right? Two sides meet. Try. Would it be a bad idea to move forward? I don't need this deal. This resets your brain. It makes you calm, curious, focused. Need is the root of all bad behavior in negotiation. Are you comfortable saying no to this? This gives them power while keeping you emotionally detached. They talk it out. They split the difference. Ask, what would you need to see to make this a fit? What problems are you really trying to solve? What happens if we don't work together? You're here to get to the truth. And the truth requires space, trust, and clarity. That starts not with yes, but with no. The minute you let go of needing the deal, you begin to negotiate with real power. Jim Camp. These questions expose reality. And reality is where strong decisions live. Everyone walks away happy. That negotiation is about mutual gain, that you should aim to make both sides feel like winners. But Camp says, that's the trap. Win-win doesn't make deals smoother. You become weak, and the other party senses it. You lower your price before they even ask. You throw in extras to sweeten the deal. You accept vague answers because you don't want to seem pushy. Camp writes, neediness is the great killer of deals. It makes you emotionally needy. You're trying to get the other person to like you. You're trying not to offend. You're trying to close fast. You stop asking hard questions. You rush to agree. You overdisclose. Why is win-win such a dangerous myth? But here's what Camp teaches. In short, the need to be liked equals the death of clarity. When your goal is win-win, you start negotiating against yourself. Why? Open book real-world example. How win-win cost millions. In one story from the field, a software firm needed to renegotiate a major enterprise contract. The sales team was desperate to maintain the relationship, so they offered discounts, free upgrades, even extended payment terms. They thought they were winning goodwill. But what actually happened? The client smelled fear. They knew the seller couldn't walk away, so they pushed harder, knowing every yes would be met with more concessions. The deal closed, but the seller lost their margin, their confidence, and their leverage going forward. All in the name of win-win. So what's the alternative? Camp says the key to real negotiation success is simple. Start with no. Here's some tactical ways you can apply this concept immediately. White heavy checkmark 1. Invite a no. Instead of, can we move forward? Try. Would it be a bad idea to move forward? Are you comfortable saying no to this? This gives them power while keeping you emotionally detached. White heavy checkmark 2. Avoid needing the deal. Repeat to yourself, I'm okay with no, don't need this deal. This resets your brain. It makes you calm, curious, focused. Need is the root of all bad behavior in negotiation. White heavy checkmark 3. Replace agreement with discovery. Ask, what would you need to see to make this a fit? What problems are you really trying to solve? What happens if we don't work together? These questions expose reality. And reality is where strong decisions live. Direct hit final message from Chapter 1. You're not in the game to make everyone happy. Lesson 2. Neediness is your greatest weakness. If you've ever walked into a negotiation feeling desperate, if you've ever agreed too fast just to close a deal, if you've ever walked away knowing you gave too much, then you've met the invisible enemy of every negotiation. Neediness. Jim Camp calls it the silent killer of deals. And in this chapter, he doesn't just warn against it. He breaks it down like a surgeon removing a tumor. Because until you deal with neediness, you'll never negotiate from a position of strength. First, let's get clear what we're really talking about. Neediness isn't wanting a good outcome. That's natural. Jim shares a story of a client, a young woman named Maria who was negotiating a multi-million-dollar tech partnership. The other side said, "We'll sign, but only if you drop the long-term service clause." Most people would panic. They'd need the win. They'd agree. But Maria didn't blink. She didn't beg. She stood firm. "Then we don't have a deal. I'm here to protect both sides from long-term risk. That clause stays or we walk." And you know what happened next? They signed. They respected her more for it. It's when you attach your identity to that outcome. But the best negotiators, they never rush. They never chase. They don't fear no. They understand the truth. I am okay with walking away. Not as a threat, but as a mindset. Because when you stop needing the deal, you open the door for a better one to emerge. You talk too much. You overshare to prove your value. You chase the other party's approval. You try to close too soon. You over-explain your prices or product. You panic when there's silence. Why? Because you're negotiating from emotion, not mission. When you feel like your worth depends on getting a yes. When you're afraid of being rejected. What if I lose the deal? What if they go to someone else? So you make concessions. You cave in. But the moment they sense fear, they push harder. 2. Desire for approval. I want them to like me. I don't want to sound difficult. So you water yourself down. You say yes to things that don't serve you. 3. Attachment to outcome. This is the only deal that matters. I need this to go right. So you start negotiating not from reality, but from a place of desperation. When your mood, focus, or self-esteem crashes the moment someone pushes back. That's not strategy. That's survival mode. And it ruins everything. Let's look at each part. First, detach from the outcome. Say to yourself, I don't need this deal to be okay. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're not making your peace of mind dependent on someone else's decision. Re-anchor to mission. Ask, what is my mission here? To protect my client's long-term value. To get clarity on whether we're aligned. To ensure my solution fits their real need. When you focus on mission, you behave with purpose, not panic. Third, slow down the tempo. Neediness speeds things up, but power slows things down. Camp students are trained to do one thing when emotions rise. Pause. Breathe. Ask a question. It resets the rhythm and puts you back in control. Neediness shows up in how you behave. And here's how camp says you'll know it's taken over. The 3 emotional triggers of neediness. Now Jim Camp outlines the 3 core sources that create emotional need. 1. Fear of loss. How to remove emotional need from negotiation. Now look, Camp doesn't just diagnose the problem. He gives the cure. Now let's bring this to life with a story. Now let's distill this down to one powerful mindset shift. Narrator, clear, steady. Neediness is fear disguised as urgency. Lesson 3. The Columbo Effect. Why being not okay? Think back to one of the most unlikely detectives in TV history. Rumpled trench coat, soft-spoken voice, seemed confused half the time. Rum family guy, but he was never fooled. Because behind that seemingly bumbling exterior, he was razor sharp. He just let everyone else think they were smarter than him. Lieutenant Columbo. Not intimidating, not polished, just curious, humble, underestimated. But by the end of every episode, even the most cunning criminals couldn't help but crack the case. Jim Camp calls this the Columbo Effect, and he says it's one of the most powerful negotiation mindsets you can ever master. The negotiator who's okay being not okay holds the most power. Why? Because when you don't posture, when you admit what you don't know, when you stay genuinely curious, the other party drops their guard. And that's when real truth surfaces. People are wired to mirror the emotions in front of them. So when you show up trying to look flawless, you create pressure, competition, ego battles. But when you show up a little slower, a little less sure, a little more human, people lean in. They relax. They talk more. They reveal what really matters. You've created space. And in that space, influence grows. So what exactly does it mean to be not okay? Intentionally. Let's be clear. This isn't about being weak, passive, or fake. It's about dropping the act of superiority. When you believe so strongly in what you're saying that there's no room for another perspective, Camp's not okay posture looks like this. Can you help me understand that better? I may be missing something. Can you walk me through it? That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're not pretending to be dumb. You're making the other person feel respected, heard, safe. And when they feel that way, they stop posturing, too. Here's an example from my friend Jim Camp himself. He was once pitching a complex logistics solution. Instead of launching into a big, confident presentation, he asked, "Before I explain anything, can you tell me what's been the biggest challenge for your team this year?" The client opened up, described delays, stress, budget waste. Then Jim said, "I don't know yet if we're the right fit, but I'd love to understand more so I can see what's possible." No pitch, no ego, just presence. By the end, the client trusted him because he didn't try to impress them. He tried to understand them, and that trust became the reason they signed. So here's how you can use this immediately. 1. Lead with questions, not presentations. Instead of explaining everything up front, start by asking, "What does success look like for you here? What's most important to solve right now? What would make this a no for you?" You're not pitching, you're exploring. 2. Pause when you don't know. If they ask a tough question, don't fake confidence. Try, "That's a good question. Let me think through that with you." You don't lose credibility. You gain authenticity. 3. Show respect, not authority. Camp says authority kills discovery, but respect opens doors. So treat every conversation like you're the student and they're the expert, even if you're the one offering the solution. We've been taught to prove ourselves, to lead with power, to hide uncertainty. But the real power comes from being present enough to say, "I don't know, but I'm here to learn." Because that's when the walls come down. That's when people trust you. That's when negotiation becomes collaboration. And that's when the deal becomes real. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for watching this video. Today's lesson, Lesson 4, Start with No, Why Every Decision Begins with Rejection. Now, most people think that negotiation success is about getting to yes as fast as possible. We've all heard it, haven't we? Get them nodding. It's yes. Because when someone says yes too quickly, you haven't built trust. You haven't explored the real issues. You haven't uncovered the truth. You've simply triggered a polite reaction, or worse, a trap. So instead of chasing yes, but when you give someone permission to say no, everything changes. They stop feeling cornered. They stop performing. They start telling the truth. And now, you're finally negotiating. Think about it. When a salesperson pressures you, don't you just want to escape? But when someone says, "Hey, feel free to say no," don't you relax? Because no gives control back to the listener. And control leads to clarity. Camp teaches us to start with no. Get small yes that lead to a big yes. Close the deal. But what if that approach actually destroys your deal? Don't say, "Do you want this feature?" What would need to happen for this to be a no? What would you need to see to feel comfortable saying yes? Is this even something worth your time? These aren't games. The client was stalling, smiling. You've lost your edge. But when you're okay with hearing no, genuinely okay, you unlock your greatest negotiation asset: calm. Calm behavior. Calm questions. Calm truth. No chasing. No pressuring. Just real clarity. Saying, "Maybe, and we'll get back to you." But it dragged on for weeks. Finally, the contractor said, "I get the feeling this might not be the right fit. Should we just call it a no and part ways now?" The client paused. Then they said, "Actually, no. We want to move forward, but we've had internal confusion." That no didn't kill the deal. It revealed the real issue. And from there, they were able to close on truth, not assumption. They're honest ways to make space for a decision. And decision is what negotiation is truly about. Do you agree that this is a good deal? Those trap the other person. They know what answer you want. Instead, ask, what concerns would stop you from moving forward? What's your hesitation here? This brings their truth to the table. In Jim Camp's world, the most dangerous word in negotiation isn't no. First point, door no is not a wall, it's a door. Instead of asking, "Can we move forward?" say, "Would it be ridiculous to explore this further? Are you comfortable saying no to this? Would it make sense to walk away now if it's not a fit?" This reduces pressure, and it builds trust fast. In most conversations, people say yes to avoid confrontation, to be polite, to get you out of the room. Second point, brain the psychology behind it. People feel most powerful, most safe, and most honest when they can say no. Your job is to create an environment where the other person can make a decision, even if that decision is no. Because a real no is better than a fake yes. It tells you where things stand. It builds trust. And most importantly, it clears emotional space for them to rethink, re-engage, and maybe eventually say yes on their own. Third point, Compass let them say no first. Camp calls this decision-based negotiation. It means your job isn't to convince or charm. Practical ways to start with no. Let's bring this down to ground level. Here are 3 ways to apply this principle today. White heavy checkmark 1. Give permission to say no. White heavy checkmark 2. Avoid yes-oriented language. White heavy checkmark 3. Ask questions that invite a decision. Real example, why no save the deal? Camp shares the story of a government contractor working on a massive project bid. Final shift, let go of the need for yes. Camp says the moment you start needing the deal, and with that clarity comes the best chance of saying the right things at the right time, which leads to the next point, which is Lesson 5, Mission and Purpose. How to negotiate without losing yourself. You're sitting across the table. The air is thick with pressure. They've pushed back on your offer twice. You feel the heat rising behind your eyes. You start to second-guess yourself. You start to fold. Why? Because you're no longer focused on what matters. You've drifted into emotion, into outcome, into need. Jim Camp says that's exactly when most people lose the negotiation, not because of the numbers, but because they've lost their mission. Direct hit mission over outcome. I want the deal. I want their yes. But Camp argues that mindset is a trap, because when your focus is on the outcome, you become reactive, emotional, easily thrown off. Narrator, most people walk into a negotiation focused on one thing: I want to win. Instead, Camp teaches, focus on your mission, your purpose for being in the room in the first place. You listen better, you ask smarter questions, you stop reacting emotionally, you don't fold under pressure. Why? Because you're anchored. Your purpose becomes your compass, not your ego. It's the reason you're having this conversation. When you stop needing the win, you gain back your attention, your clarity, and your dignity. Mission protects you from becoming someone you not, just to get a result you don't actually believe in. 1. Define your mission before every call or meeting. Ask yourself, why am I here? Return to your mission in the heat of the moment. If things get tense, say, let's pause for a second. I want to make sure we still aligned with the purpose of this conversation. That resets the room. It shows leadership. It shows that you're not flustered, you're focused. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time. What outcome serves both sides with integrity? What's non-negotiable and why? Example, my mission is to help this client make the best decision for their long-term success with a solution that's honest, sustainable, and clear. Write it down. Read it before the meeting. Let it guide your tone, pacing, and behavior. You bring your own anchor. Because when you lead with mission, you don't just protect the deal. You protect yourself. The vendor came in aggressive, bold presentation, fast pace, high price. The consultant didn't match their energy. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly said, our mission here is simple. We're here to find a solution that meets the needs of the client long-term, with accountability on both sides. That sentence changed the tone of the entire meeting. The vendor slowed down. They stopped pushing. They started collaborating because they weren't dealing with a needy negotiator. They were dealing with someone who knew their mission and wouldn't abandon it. Camp defines mission like this. The negotiator's job is to make the best decision in service of the right problem at the right time for the right reason, with zero emotional attachment to the outcome. That's the real job. And when you hold on to your mission, you become unshakable. Magnifying glass tilted left. What is mission in negotiation? Your mission is your why. It's not your price, not your product. Open book story. The calm negotiator. Narrator. A Camp-trained consultant was hired to negotiate with a multi-million-dollar vendor. Brain. Why mission makes you stronger when you lead with mission. Hammer and wrench. How to define and use your mission here. How Camp suggests you use this in real life. White heavy checkmark. White heavy checkmark 2. White heavy checkmark 3. Let go of needing the outcome. This is hard, but crucial. Speech balloon quote to remember, mission replaces emotion. And the moment you stay in mission, you become the calmest, clearest person in the room. Jim Camp, Lesson 6, Tools of the Trade, Questions, Silence, and Behavior Control. Let's get something straight. The best negotiators don't win with charm. They don't win with fancy slides. And they don't win by talking the other side into it. They win because they understand this. In every negotiation, whoever controls their behavior best controls the outcome. That's what Jim Camp teaches in this chapter. And he hands us three of the most powerful tools any negotiator can use. 1. Asking. 2. Listening. 3. Controlling your behavior through silence. Let's break each one down, starting with the most underestimated skill of all. Brain tool number 1. The power of a well-timed question narrator. Most people talk too much in negotiation. They pitch, they prove, they push. But Camp says, every time you speak, you give away information. Every time you ask, you gain it. So ask. Ask questions that create space. Questions that uncover truth. Questions that reveal what the other side really cares about. Direct hit. Use questions like a surgeon, not a salesman. Don't say, let me tell you why we're a great fit. Say, what would make this a great fit for you? Don't say, here's what I propose. Say, what are your expectations around timing, cost, and delivery? Camp-trained negotiators are relentless in their curiosity, but never pushy. Always calm, always patient. Open book story, the question that shifted everything. Narrator. One of Camp's clients, a new negotiator, was in a meeting with a tough corporate buyer. The buyer said, we already have a vendor. You're wasting your time. The rookie almost froze. But instead, she said, can I ask, what would it take for you to consider a second option? There was a pause. A long one. Then the buyer said, honestly, we're unhappy with delivery speed. But no one's asked about that. That question opened the door to a six-figure contract. Not with a pitch, with one quiet, intentional question. Shushing face. Tool number 2. The strategic use of silence. Narrator. Slow, composed silence is uncomfortable for most people. That's why it's so powerful. Camp says, silence is your weapon. Use it. After you ask a question, pause. After you state your offer, pause. After they push back, pause. Because silence does two things. 1. It creates tension. 2. It forces the other side to reveal. They'll often rush to fill the gap. And in that rush, truth comes out. Person in lotus position. Practice, shut up discipline. Try it. Next time you feel the urge to fill a gap, don't. Let the moment breathe. It's not weakness. It's strength under control. Joystick. Tool number 3. Behavior control. Narrator. Camp teaches that your number one job in a negotiation is to control your own behavior. Not theirs, yours. Because when you feel nervous, rushed, or offended, you react. And when you react emotionally, you lose your edge. Camp's rule: behavior drives results. Control yours, and watch theirs follow. Counterclockwise arrows button, don't match their energy. Lead with yours. If they're aggressive, stay calm. If they interrupt, pause. If they stonewall, ask a question. Your calm becomes contagious. Hammer and wrench. The Camp toolkit in action here is how to apply all three tools in real time. 1. Ask an open question. What challenges have you faced with other vendors? 2. Stay silent. Let them answer without interruption. 3. Observe your own reactions. Stay grounded, focused, curious. Lightbulb. The no-talk exercise. Camp recommends a powerful exercise. Go through an entire meeting with 80% questions, 10% clarification, and only 10% statements or selling. Try it. You'll learn more. Say less and earn massive respect. Key final thought: questions, silence, behavior. This is how you lead. Narrator. Steady, focus. These tools don't just help you win deals. They help you become calm under pressure. They help you listen for truth, not just agreement. They help you lead without forcing. Because leadership in negotiation isn't about being louder. It's about being smarter, quieter, and more intentional.